Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Friday Seminar series. On behalf of the University of Queensland and the Sustainable Minerals Institute, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today. We pay our respect to the ancestors and to their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections with country, and we recognize their valuable contributions to Australia and the global society. It's my great pleasure today to welcome Bill Haylock. Bill has over 45 years experience in the resource and environment sector. He is the chairman and managing director of PX4 Software, a director of the Ardent Group, and the Touch Energy. He is a former president of the Environment Institute of Australia and New Zealand, and a former CEnvP Board Member, an Honorary Fellow of AusIMM and Chair of the AusIMM Interim Tenement Management Society. Today, Bill's talk will be on what are mineral rights and authorities and how they differ around the globe. Please join me today to welcome Bill.
Thanks, Eric. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. All right, it's probably more for Eric and what he's doing. It's irrespective of what you do in the mining exploration game, the oil and gas game, power stations, pipelines, ports, wherever you are in the resource sector, you will not actually be on the ground unless there is some form of right. And in the mining game, exploration, oil and gas, they're called mineral rights around the world, mineral rights. They give you the appropriate approval to go explore, mine, etc. Today, people call that your social license. In America, they're claims. In Australia, we call them mining tenements, but they vary all over the world, and there's different avenues to apply for them. And I'm going to take you in depth into some of that later in this presentation. But I want to give you the base of what you will, if you're new to this game, then what it'll actually mean when you get out in the real world. For those who are in academia, when you actually are out in the field and you're doing something on a research project for a mining company, you will be on a form of mineral rights. You wouldn't be, you could not get there in any other way. So I thought I might just start this by doing a bit of an intro. Will it work now? There we go. So I started my career 45 years ago in what was then known as the uranium province of the Alligator Rivers region. The uranium province of the Alligator Rivers region. Does anybody know where that is? Northern Territory? Does anybody know what the uranium development province is called today? Kakadu. Exactly, Kakadu. So that whole footprint, back when the Ranger uranium mine was approved, the federal government then turned it into a park, and no longer did we have access to those vast amounts of uranium. And there's some incredible deposits sterilised in that park today, unfortunately. Ranger uranium mine and myself that's where I started my career 45 years ago. For some of you grey hairs, I'm the same age as you. I'm a lot older than I look. I had a baby face. I could never get into the pub when I was a little kid, right? So anyway, it comes back at some stages. Ranger was the very, very first environmental impact study of any sort, let alone being in the mining industry, of any sort in Australia. This is where it started. For those who might remember, there was a guy called Dr. Ted Coldrake. He was the guy that actually did the EIS. It was this thick at the time. When I arrived, sections of that were my Bible by which I had to operate. And today I can actually say that every mechanism in there to control any spills worked. There were retention ponds where there was a couple of spills on site. It didn't get off site. Today we have EISs this big, and yet we had an efficiency with what Ted did that actually delivered. All right, so that's just another question for a later day. But what I would like to do now, I just want to understand who's in the audience, who you are. So I just thought with a show of hands, geology, geoscience, oh, dominating. Well, that's good because that's where it all begins, right? What about hydrology? Any hydrologists? Oh, we're going to need them. Without water, no mine. Right, what about metallurgists? There we go. It's almost a 50-50, isn't it? Engineering, a couple. Mining engineering? Yeah, there we go. All right, what about environment? Social, one here? Excellent. Bill Meir together, right? And what about finance? No one in finance? No. Okay, I'll come back to finance a few times as we progress, but that gives me a bit of an understanding, and I guess that's very reflective of the work that happens here in the Institute, all right? All right, so what I want to do on this agenda, it's a bit about the why, the what, the how, the where, and then what's all this about? I keep talking about jurisdictions. What does that actually mean? All right, so in this, what I want to do in the why is why do we have these mineral rights? What are they for? What do they do? You know, what does it mean to society? And then the what, the how, and the where. But how many of you here are students? All right, okay. I'm pretty excited to be here to present to you because you are the future of sustaining and maintaining society. All right, you're the future of maintaining and sustaining society. The question is, why would I say that? Why would I say that everything that you're going to do is to maintain and enhance what's been happening? Why would I say that? What about some of your old grey hairs? Why am I saying that about mining and exploration? In what way? Exactly. There is not one thing in your life, in society, that is either straight out of the ground and into a product or is needed to produce a product or produce food or clothing or anything. There's nothing. There's nothing that we can do that changes that. 5,000 years ago, was it the Copper Age or the Bronze? Something like that. 3,000 years ago was the Iron Age, followed on from it. From that moment on, we have turned in to being a mining society. And it's made us more efficient. It's made us more effective. All right. Sure, we've got some legacies with it. All right. And we've got some issues that we're going to face into the future, but we can't live without it. How many people here have had an X-ray? A scan? Where does that all come from? It's uranium. Without uranium mining, right, our medicine would not deliver what it's delivering today, let alone the benefits of the energy that comes with that a lot of us, understand. All right, so there's just nothing in it. But let me ask you a couple of other questions. How many minerals do you think are in your iPhone? All of them. All right. Could be 30, 40, 70 if we're talking about the chemicals that are broken down. And it's the same with the car. There's just an incredible array of minerals that make these two products. All right. One is convenience to get us from A to B, quicker, more efficient, gets us there. The other is the communication, the relation, our data, everything that we're doing. We can't live without them anymore. We cannot close that down. We can't close the internet down. We can't turn the power off that we have. All right? The whole system would collapse. So minerals are the foundation now of this society. And mankind should start to actually appreciate mining and love it more, because you can't live without it, than what I see quite often in politics, where they're having a crack at the mining industry. And I think that's highly unfair. There's no real understanding in society of how deep the mineral world goes and what it does for us. You know, I know I'm on the bandwagon. Right? Okay. So the resource industry, as I mentioned, is made up of all these sectors. The exploration and mining, all the minerals, so we're going, whether it be coal, uranium, hard rock, soft, all those things. We've got the oil and gas industry, again, mineral titles get on the ground, energy generation, and then the infrastructure to connect them all together and make them work. That's the extent of the resource sector. But what I want to do is I want to focus in on the exploration and mining industry and their mineral rights to get to the ground. Can anybody explain to me, and I've just simplified this, 5 phases of the industry in general. So the exploration and mining industry sector, 5 phases in general. Can anybody help me? Which is the first one? First phase. Exploration, absolutely. All right. What would follow on from exploration? Sorry? Right, how do I get project development? Right, and what comes with that? That all leads to? Environment, plus that ends up with a mining lease or a mining claim. We call that the approvals process, because all those studies crank up, all come together for a mining lease. All right. Third phase? Sorry? No. I've got to build the bugger. It's the construction period comes in, a whole different group of people to build what's going on. So what will happen, and I'll come back to this, but in essence, what happens is that a board today of any mining or exploration company will not commit to a construction of a mine until it has a granted mining lease or mining claim or extraction authority, whatever it is in the world. They will not move because there is a risk. If they don't have it and they commit the money and go and do things, a risk. The boards will not move. And we started this 30 odd years ago, the industry changed. So at that point in time, money is committed if I've got the mining lease and it still stacks up. And then I go into the construction phase, followed by mining, pit to port, operations. What do you reckon the 5th phase is? Closure, cleaning it up, rehabilitation, all right? So that's basically what we have. They're in general, and I'm going to speak to these in specifics in a second and just delve down to them a bit deeper so that you understand what license comes where and how and why. What is that mineral right? What is the attachment, right? But this is interesting dollars up there. What am I trying to say with these dollars? What am I trying to say with the dollars? Sorry? Right. First 3, high risk, money being spent, nothing comes in. I've got to raise the money, I've got to have investors, I've got to have really good geos. And here's the kicker. For every 1,000 exploration permits in the world, 1 up and operating gold mine. And that's probably one of the riskiest ones, 1,000 to 1. Coal's a lot less, oil and gas is a lot less. But for 1,000 gold exploration licenses around the world, we will only see 1 gold mine operating. We might see 2 approved, 1 operating. Highly, highly risky. Then I've got to go into all those studies that we talked about, and I'll come back to those in the approval stage, the mining lease application, the compensation, the negotiations, the native title, money being spent. Now I've got my $500 million, $2 billion, $3 billion to build. And then when I operate pit to port, and when that product lands at the port in the boat, in comes the cash, starts flowing back. So I've got to make sure those first 3 phases are well and truly paid for when I do my construction and op costs to get this thing up and running for the approval for the board. And then I've got to make sure I have my residuals that the government will hang on to make the rehabilitation happen. Again, I've now got money going out. So it's a difficult industry when you look at it like this. It doesn't come easy. Doesn't mean that there's people who don't want to do it. People love being in this industry. It's so dynamic, it's so strong. And if you find a good one, a good deposit, bang. I was fortunate enough to do the approval process for BHP Cannington. And incidentally, and I didn't know it until I got on the site when they opened it up and had the grand opening at Cannington, the biggest silver lead zinc mine in the world. It was pioneered with aeromagnetics from BHP by a guy called Dr. Tommy Whiting. And I didn't realise that it was Tommy's because he had nothing to do with the approval. And I was working with a half a dozen other BHP team. We get it approved, up and running. 3rd drill hole, bang. They had a world-class mine, still operates today. The kick, I happened to be in high school geology with Tommy and didn't even, right? I didn't know that he'd end up in BHP until we ended up on that mine site together on his approved mine. Been thick as thieves ever since. He went, we went to one uni, I went to another. But the point I'm making is that BHP invested heavily in aeromagnetics, right? And when they found it, it's a tier 1, it paid for everything. It was a sensational outcome for them, right? Okay, so exploration. There's a lot of aspects in the exploration gig. And the majority of it starts with a desktop survey of some sort. Somebody comes together an idea, we're going to chase this mineral. We think in the world economics, demand and supply and demand rather, sorry, this mineral is going to be hot to trot like copper is at the moment, gold is at the moment, lithium went like this, lithium's gone like that. And you'll see that with a number of minerals, nickel's the same, but some are core. Some are absolute core, still, right? It's gone like this and it's come like this, but it's solid. Coke and coal, absolutely solid because there is no other form of energy to deal with smelters, whether it be nickel, aluminium, lead, zinc, copper, etc. Right? They're solid because the whole world needs so much of it, no matter where we are. Right? So it starts with a desktop. Somebody decides that, okay, we're going to do this. Now we have to see wherever I am in the world, can I actually access that piece of land? Is it available? Does somebody else have it? Is there an exploration license on it? Is there a mining lease already there? Is there an environmental like Kakadu that won't let me get in there now? All right? So before this desktop, yes, I think we could find something in this region, but can I actually access the ground? All right? Let's say I can access the ground, I get the exploration license or exploration permit, wherever it is in the world, or change the names, and I get on the ground. And the beginning is really low impact, as most of you know. I'm out there doing chip sampling, I'm going upstreams, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. I'm overlaying everything that I can find from governments or old reports in the area. And I eventually get to a stage I've defined drill hole targets. So at that stage, my environment now ramps up further. Am I in areas there's environmental impact? Where can I access? I've got to talk to the landowner. Where's the best place to put my access tracks? I'm going to need drill pads. I'm starting to impact. And it's bringing in more and more people. Is there any native title, cultural heritage issues? Right? I need clearance. I've got to make sure I can do this. So all that approval stuff, the secondary approvals come with the mineral rights. They attach to it before I can actually do anything. Then I start drilling, right? And I find something. Now I've got to go to infill drilling. I've got to define the resource. Whilst I'm doing that, all those scoping studies start. The pre-feasibility starts, the feasibility, the banking feasibility, the EIS has to drop in, the mining lease application process starts, native title negotiations start, landowner compensation negotiations start. I'm negotiating with the council. All of this is under the umbrella of the mines department in whichever part of the world I'm in, because they'll give me the ultimate approval. But I've got all these things in parallel working to take me through that approval process, all right, before I can mine. So without approvals, a plethora of things today. All right, if I've come out of that exploration and I think I've got something, I've now got an incredible array of things I've got to do. What I've seen in the last 45 years, as I said, I've seen an EIS go from this to this. Are the outcomes on the ground for the operation any better? Are the controls we put in place any better? Are the licensing we do, is it any better? I've got my doubts. I think we spend a lot of time producing things like this. Guess what happens? Sure, I've got a lot of consultants and a lot of great data, but guess what happens? I submit that EIS. Who do I submit it to? The government. Who else needs to look at it? Landowners, all the stakeholders involved, cultural heritage, native title, people who are opposed to the mine, everybody. Very few of them have got an expertise to look at 70 different topics in that document. All right? Just a shopping list of topics. Where in reality, after 45 years of environmental management in the resource sector, we know that 90% of those things or more are a standard environmental management plan that if we follow it, they won't be an issue. We already know that. Water might be the critical factor here because of lack of it. We could have a certain endangered species, or we could have a cultural heritage issue. They're the real risks. And they're the risks that we should actually be looking at, because we call it today impact assessment. But in the resource industry, it's not that at all. It's impact justification. Because I cannot move the resource. There it is in the ground. I can't move that. I might be able to move infrastructure on the surface around a bit, but I can't move where that resource is in the ground. And society needs the resource. All right? So coming back into this approvals process, we should really be focusing and reduce our costs and effort from everybody on the major risks that we really need to address, not a plethora of a shopping list that we've now got in EISs. It's insane what we're doing. We're wasting time and effort of everybody in society that's a stakeholder involved in this process. All right? I'm on another bandwagon. We now go to construction. Construction will follow, as I said, the board's approval to spend the money. And they will not do it unless the mining lease or the mining claim or the extraction authority is approved. They will not do it. It's too risky in this day and age. So with the mining, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes you hear the minister go, oh, we approved a mine. We've approved a mining lease. And the board's sitting back there going, that's great, thank you. The minister's telling you he's going to have a brand new mine, or her, right? Board hasn't made that decision yet. It's now got to go back and double check its figures. It's taken all the risk out. Now I've got to make sure that the financial feasibility will actually work. Right? Commit the money, and it's now on a granted authority, which will have a stipulation of conditions by which you operate that mining facility, that mining title. It'll also have an environmental authority. In most parts of the world, you'll get the two. You'll get the extractive authority to mine. You'll also have an environmental authority that lists everything in there. Now, it's all the ecology issues, all the water, groundwater, surface water, air, noise, dust, soils, topsoil, all right? Waste products, everything's going to be in there. Huge list. Some of it's 6-monthly reporting, some of it's annual, some of it you can't actually do until you go out there and do the clearing studies with fauna spotters on the ground. Can't disturb until I actually do that. So the construction guys, it's important for them to actually know what that license is, to know what their duties are, because they're kind of a little bit removed from the company itself where all this happens. All right? Let me take you back for a sec. Just want to come back here. What I'm saying at the moment, or trying to say, it's quite interesting in this industry that the exploration geologists and the exploration teams, only a few of them will follow over into the approval space. There's like a handover once I've done the infill drilling. I've now got a mine geologist coming on because I've now got to do all that definition for the mine geology, for the mining engineer. So what's it going to look like when I extract it? How am I going to extract it, etc. Right? Different group of people, plus all the approval people. I've cranked up, as I said, all these environmental studies, native tile, whole plethora of other people. Bang, goes to construction. Normally that's a third party. 2 or 3 of the majors. Here we've got civil companies and then guys that come in and build the mineral processing plants, etc., etc. Whole different group. Quite often, all subbies to the company. And I'll only have 1 or 2 company project managers, which is that becomes important for them to bring the intellectual property across of what the license was approved to do. The footprint. What needs to be built before I can do this? How should I can clear? Where can I clear? All those aspects that go with it. Then when it goes to mining, a whole brand new group. I've got all the mining engineers coming in. I've got the mine geologists, I've the site environmental players, I've got the cultural heritage team, safety team, whole different group of people. And then closure, most of them are gone. The Enviro might be around because the Enviro has now got the greatest responsibility, right? Hoping that it hasn't been pollution and I can actually leave it in a useful landform of some sort. Intellectual property across the industry is lost quite often. We don't see this continuity all the way through. It's all in different packages, in different platforms with different people. All right? This connection of intellectual property. I'll leave that thought with you. So the construction guys, what are we building here? I've got maybe a railhead and a rail. I've got to bring that in. I might need water from a bore field. I've got to develop the bore field pipelines, bring the water in. Without water, no mining. You know, we can find the greatest resources in the world, but if I don't have water, I can't process. You metallurgists know that better than anyone, right? Quantum of water is huge. I may have to bring in electricity or build a power station. It might be gas if I've got coal seam methane, right? Most of them are diesel, or if there's a gas pipeline close, I can connect the gas pipeline up and we can bring that in. So I need all that background infrastructure, potentially a bitumen road, depending on what I'm doing. Depending on the commodity, do I need the rail and the railhead? Certain commodities, bulk, I need rail, can't fly it out. I can fly uranium, gold, silver, precious stones, some of the precious metals, I can fly all them out. But when I move over to aluminium, copper, nickel, lead and zinc, iron ore, coal, they're all bulk. I need now rail to do that, right? So then on the site, I'm now going to have a sterilised area where it won't be the mine. And there I'm setting up for the mineral processing plant. So I've got a section for that. I might need a camp. I might need admin blocks. I will need certain retention environmental ponds. I'll probably need a tailings dam. I'll need the pit itself or the underground adit to be cleared, pre-stripped and all that ready. This is all part of construction, right? And everything's got to then be turned on, checked, audited, right? Make sure that everything's working. So there's quite a few steps to get us to pit to port, right? Where we can now make money, shareholders will get a return, right? And hopefully the company is in a position to keep going forward, right? The pit to port, only part where we make the money. This is, and if you want research dollars, let me just give you a hint. Operating mine sites are the best place to look for it. Don't go to the exploration companies unless they're exploring and mining, and then they'll have a budget for you. Does that make sense? Right? This is where the money is. All right? It doesn't. At the beginning, we're fighting for the money to get stuff in the ground. All right? And it's dynamic. You know, the amount of things that go on in the mining industry all over the world in terms of the technology, and it's cutting edge, and some adopt really early, others don't. It just depends on where you are, all right? But it's exciting and it's dynamic, and it's all over the world. This is happening. It's not just happening here. We are a really, really big player, and I'm in the game, and I'm going to come back to that because there's a mentality that's come with that before I get there. So pit to port is where we make the money. All right. So closure. What are the main criteria for closure? What are the 3 things that we need to consider for closure? No one's ever been there? I mean, it is the poor cousin of the whole industry, right? All right, first thing is I need to leave a non-polluting site. It's got to be stable and non-polluting. So whether that's water or seepage or whatever it might be, it needs to be non-polluting. It needs to be stable. So nobody has to come back and do any maintenance. But we also try to make it useful if we can. And I don't think that we've actually got to the extent of how useful mining lands can be. But sitting here right under our nose in southeast Queensland is one of the greatest examples of what can happen. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? A mining region that transformed into another massive industry. That's one, but it's not the one I want to explain here, but that does happen, yes. Anyone else got any ideas? Anyone heard of Ipswich? Anyone from Ipswich? Ipswich. That's why southeast Queensland has been so successful. We had 3 coal-fired power stations on the Brizzy River, the coal coming down the Bremer into the Brisbane River and generating Brisbane. We had one of the very first coal plants down there at Tenerife, the gas works. Coal's come down, we turned into gas. We articulated Brisbane with gas. We were one of the first cities in the world. Oh, so 50, 60 mining pits out there. A lot of them were small, family-run concerns that people would come from Wales and elsewhere and come out here. And then, about 35, 40 years ago, the Queensland government freed up the waste industry and turned it and said, it's not going to be no longer a government-run thing, but it's now private. You can manage it to the sector. So now I need somewhere to put the waste. So over that time, we've ended up now, we have 50 waste management facilities in Ipswich, taking a whole variety of different wastes. A lot of it is your putrescible waste that you put out in your bin every week goes there. Some of those there's all different techniques for managing it, but we've had really high science in terms of the approvals and the ground covers and the seepage and managing that for 40 years. These are not just hole in the ground, throw it in. That stopped 40 years ago. But that industry became so dynamic that we had waste, and still do, coming from Melbourne and Sydney because our tariffs weren't as great. It was cheaper to bring a 10-ton truck, it still is in some instances, to Ipswich and put the waste there. So this industry just went kachunka all over the last 40 years. Just been incredible how all those pits and the waste rock dumps became assets for a new industry. So the issue with waste, and everybody talks about we don't want waste in landfill, we don't want waste in landfill. Does anybody know where that came from? Where that mantra came from? It came New York, London, Sydney, downtown Melbourne. It came from other parts of the world that, guess what? Had no landfill space. The whole world's taken the mantra up. We didn't need to do that here because we had landfill space. Now, after all this time, however, we are now starting to run out of it. We're filling it up. We need some new techniques to actually deal with waste. All right? But that's where the mantra came. You've got landfill space, it's the cheapest, quickest, manageable way to do it, all right, without imposing more cost on society. All right? But if you don't have it, sure, you're going to have to look for other things. Anyway, that's an example. So the point I'm trying to make here is mine sites leave behind a whole raft of resources. Let's have a look at the Hunter and the Bowen Basin. All those big coal mines out there, 40 big coal mines out in the Bowen Basin, right? Or thereabouts. What have they all got? A bitumen road, a power line, a pipeline for water, admin, accommodation, a treatment plant, which is probably waste still, right? Overburden, pits. I don't think that we've yet got our head around how each one of those in its own will be ultimately a future economic point. It'll be something that we can do with it. They're resources that we can't just close down. We have to work out how to actually utilise them. I think that I see that as the next move in the closure game. Yeah? All right, so I did all that just to put it in context, okay? Exploration licence, prospecting permit, then I might have this development approval if I need it to get the approval. Then I've got the mining lease, the mining claim, the extraction authority, and that takes me through to the end. But what are these mineral rights or authorities? All right? I've given you a whole list of the names, and I've given you the reasons that you need to do it. You can't operate without them, all right? But I want to give you some context in Australia, particularly with the USA, and how it works. Because Australia is not dissimilar to the rest of the world, and a lot of the world has followed Australia. So the PNG Act followed the Queensland Act. The Mozambique Act followed the Western Australian Act. A few of them did because we were such powerful mining states. And subsequently, it's easier to acquire upfront an exploration licence here because it is issued by the government over a piece of land. So I don't have to own the land. I don't have to have mineral rights or surface rights to the land. I can just apply for it and through due process have it issued, and then I can start exploring. When I progress, like here at the Stanmore coal mine, I end up with all these landowners, which are all the coloured ones. The red one, the blue are the mining leases. The red are still the exploration licenses that still exist. So that's what my land is looking like. So I can apply for the exploration and the mines everywhere, right? And it's easy to do up front. But then when I come to the approval process, I have a lot more negotiations, studies, and the feasibilities, everything to do to get it through to approval. And we followed the British system. The Brits were miners. And wherever the Brits went in the world and they put their flag in the ground, the mineral rights remained with the Crown. So we have 7 mining jurisdictions in Australia. One was given those rights as the Northern Territory later, but the other 6 were independent countries. We were 6 independent countries, all with our own mining act. We still have our own Mining Act today, even though we went through Federation. Federation only consolidated 2 or 3 things. Taxation of the borders, all right? But the mineral rights remained with each of those states. Now they belong to the state governments to administer and run. Nothing goes back to the Brits, but under that law. Now that law went in different parts of the world and you can see it. Whereas in the USA, and if you can see all those little green creticulars up here within the purple, they're basically mining claims on blocks of land, whether they're a 1/4 hectare, 1/2 hectare, hectare. So what happened in the USA, there were 13 states that fought the revolution, the War of Independence, at which stage those 13 states were all created by the Brits and the royals owned the minerals, right? Royal family at the time. At the end of that war, those 13 states created the USA, the United States of America from those 13 states. And then they turned around and looked at each other and, well, oh, what are we going to do with the mineral rights? We're going to give them to the people. And they did that. So every block of land ended up with a mineral right. And then when they went west of the Mississippi, and all that land west of the Mississippi was actually federal land because they bought stuff off the French. That's the Louisiana Act. They fought the Spaniards. They fought the Mexicans. They bought this. They did that. And from there, all that way over, it was actually feds. Then they chopped it up into the states. But then they brought in a couple of different acts that gave it not just surface rights, but mineral rights. So today in America, and in most states, there's only a few other parts of the world like this, because most of it's a bit more like the Brits, right? Where the state itself owns the minerals. Where here, the landowner owns the minerals. So for me now to consolidate all that in purple, or even in green, can you imagine how many negotiations I've got to do? So for them to put a mining project together, or an exploration project together, and they call them landmen there. We couldn't do that in Australia. We call them tenement managers here. They call them still landmen because it's an old world. So they have to negotiate with every landowner and buy the mineral rights and sometimes the surface rights for them to package it up. But here's the other thing with that. Once they've got all of that, it's actually then easier for them to progress to a mine. They don't have as much of a hurdle in the approvals process that we do. They're encouraged to go harder and faster to do it. All right. A couple of other things I'll come to in a second. All right. So jurisdictions. Wherever there's a mining act, we call it a jurisdiction. So there's what we've estimated as a company, we think there are 400 mining jurisdictions in the world. We work in 50 of them at the moment. That's accelerating. But this is how it works. 195 or 198 countries, something like that in the world. America has 50 states, subsequently 50 different mining jurisdictions. Australia, 6 states, territory, 7 mining jurisdictions. Canada, 13 territories and provinces, 13 mining acts, jurisdictions. Argentina, 27 or 28 states, the same. So when we add those numbers up and then we look at India and others, Brazil, we've kind of estimated 400, but that's just for exploration and mining. There's a similar plethora of acts for oil and gas. All right, so wherever you go in the world and whatever you're doing, wherever your careers take you, you'll be working on something, in a jurisdiction, on an authority somewhere. All right? But what I'd like to do now is just to highlight a few things that I've already started to mention. The mineral ownership, the USA, it's onerous to acquire, it's private. Whereas Australia, most of Canada, Argentina belongs to the state. The state controls the minerals. Yeah? So as we come down, Our regulations get stronger and harder. The time to approve it gets longer. The USA, it's quicker because of the way they're structured. All right. But here's the really interesting one. Or is it back up the top here? It's the royalty up the top. Because the Americans own it, the landowner owns the mineral rights with the land. Guess what happens to the royalty? There's very limited royalties in the United States. There's some state royalties, some federal, but very little. Whereas here, the people see the benefits of the royalty. WA and Queensland are very powerful states. We've built a lot of hospitals, schools, support the police force, do a lot of things because of our mineral wealth. There's an incredible, you probably know right now that the mining industry's fighting a huge coal royalty that's hurting it, that the Labor government brought in, all right? But that royalty goes into consolidated revenue to build things for the future, all right? Whereas in America, they don't have that same, they don't get that benefit. But most of the rest of the world is following what we're doing, all right? So just to start to wrap up, your careers, you need a mining title. You need to have some registration. You're going to have to deal with government. You're going to need to know what that is. Within your network, you're going to have your bosses, your colleagues, the teams that you work in. All right. You're going to end up having clients. There'll be consultants that you might be a consultant yourself or work within a consultancy that brings all these quite specialised skills to the team. You're going to have the landowners and you're going to have other stakeholders. And that will be, depending on where you work, you'll be working in this sphere with all these different people. All right. So right from the beginning, you need to know that your network's going to grow in all these different areas. All right. And that you're going to, and when you start your career and you go to your first job, make sure you understand what that mining title is. What are its restrictions? What are the conditions? Because that will affect you whether you're the mine planner, the hydrologist, and what's the quality of the water that I can discharge, or my wastes? Have I got restrictions on them on the site? Where can I put it? All right, etc. All right. So wherever you go, you'll have that mineral right, or that will control you, and you'll have a government, you'll have a stakeholder, you'll have a landowner. Everybody with a vested interest in what you're doing on the ground. All righty. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We've got about 10 minutes for questions.
Thanks, Bill. That was really interesting.
Maybe your name and...
Oh, sorry, my name's Tom Evans. I'm an exploration geologist. I was wondering, with respect to exploration, permitting and approval stages of the process and all of the 7 different jurisdictions we've got in Australia, do you think one jurisdiction is significantly better in terms of the legislation and approvals process than another? And do you think, this is a question in 3 parts, sorry, I guess. Do you think that there's more value in states being able to tailor their approvals process individually to suit their needs, or it would be beneficial for Australia to have a single structured process for mining approvals and exploration, permitting, tenure, all that sort of thing?
Can I deal with number 3 first? Look, when you're in business, if you've only got one process to have to follow wherever you operate, absolutely. So it's, if we had one uniform system, it would be sensational. We do have the National Environmental Protection Act, Pollution Prevention Act, that oversees everything, and it's of national significance. So depending on what the operation is, we will have to deal with that. But then we come to the state level, I've got the Mining Act and then the Environment Act. So it would make it easier for particularly the juniors, where they have less resources. The first question, yes. Would I go public and say? There's no doubt that WA is a cut above us all. We've, in Queensland, used to be really, really slick and smart, but we've bogged ourselves down with over a variety of different governments, unfortunately. Some states like South Australia have invested a lot in exploration work to encourage people to go there. Victoria, almost a basket case. NT would love us to be there. However, Arnhem Land is quite difficult because it's actual rights. It's native title rights, not native titles rights, land rights. So yeah, it does vary from one end to the other. All right? And yeah, New South Wales is a little bit more difficult as well. All right? But the four best states to work in really: WA, Queensland, South Australia, Northern Territory. And the second one, now I've missed that. I've gone from 3 to 1.
Oh, it was 2 and 3 were sort of connected. Do you think it's better to have a unified code than individually tailored codes for states' needs?
Hi, Sally Allen here, another exploration geo. If you're going through all those approvals and processes, this is just based on your knowledge, would you recommend, or do you have a recommendation for trying to speed up that process? If there was one thing that you could change in that approvals process, what would it be?
Well, in the overall approval of a mine, I'll go back to the mine. Now, let me start with exploration. I don't think that we should be aware of cultural heritage and perhaps some no-go areas prior to walking it. Environment's probably a little bit less tricky. We should really know if there's endangered. But then if we're just doing that hand sampling, I think it should come in the stages. We shouldn't get bogged down with all the environmental approvals, cultural heritage clearances and native title negotiations prior to trying to explore. I think we should do the things that are specific to the risk on the ground, and then elevate that as we wish to do more impact, the drilling, costing, trenching, where we're going to go. In the mining side of things, I mentioned before that I think the shopping list of what we're asked for in terms of reference is ridiculous. It's just wasting a lot of time and money, and it's impacting on everybody because nobody can get through the knowledge of what all this means on that. So I think that could happen. I think the government could do that, and they're looking at it right now. The Mineral Council of Australia, AMEC, and a few others are putting papers together for that the ministers asked for. How can we actually speed things up and clean it up? So that's coming as well. All right. So I think there is room to be far smarter, far more efficient, far more effective, because that ultimately has been sustainable. Right. Whereas if we blow our resources on trying to get from A to B and that timeline, it hurts. Right? So we once upon a time in my life, I got mining leases granted in Queensland quicker than anyone else. And I did that with a bit of software that nobody knew I had. It was a tool. But I had a mantra that every box that needed to be ticked, we double checked it and we ticked it. So there was nothing that people could object to on the ground on actually how we pegged the mining lease or how we went through the process, or that we'd submitted everything that somebody needed to see. So we really made sure that we were quite meticulous and thorough in doing that. But one thing I think for the geologists, I think they're a scientist. And they're not far from an environmental scientist because they're really cutting edge are out there. I find it really interesting that there's data that they could collect in terms of soils, what they see in ecology on the ground, and particularly water and groundwater, why they're not starting to collect some of that data. I know it's time and effort for the exploration company, particularly the juniors, but that becomes your baseline. And if you're there exploring for 2 or 3 years, can you imagine what that's going to help me do when I've got to package up the impact study with that original data that's built up over 2 or 3 years, not just the 2 years of data and seasons I need for an EIS. Does that make sense? So I think the geologist actually has a bigger role to play. I hate to burden you with that, but
Hi, my name's Andrew White, science journalist, communicator. So I did have a question about responsible acceleration, but you've answered that. So the next one is about the impact of, for example, mapping and drone technology on mineral rights. That it used to be that you had to do it with, string basically, but now, the precision with which you can say where these pieces of land exist, has that had an impact on the speed and accuracy of the industry?
I think that's, Andrew, that's directly related to what the sensors are, right? So we're looking for new sensors all the time. I don't think we've yet found the tool. We can get to 1 kilometre deep, but getting what society now needs because of its pressure for copper and other things, we need to be able to get to 2 kilometres deep, right? With a sensor of some sort. What has been happening elsewhere, it goes back to a difference between us and the USA as well. In the USA, they have no requirement to give their exploration data up. Whereas you're given an exploration license or permit here in another jurisdiction, we must report all that data and all the lab stuff, and it goes to the government. And then when you release that area, it's open to everybody else. So we have this huge gathering of data. But there is now a raft of geological companies around the world that are pulling together data and data sources to help identify what was missed or what that might have led to, right? So there's a lot of tools being used. Has anybody heard of cobalt metals? Okay, so the cobalt metals out of the USA, financed by Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. They went on a spree, and they still do this, that they engaged all these PhD students on data and data collection and aimed them at looking at all this different geological data. Where was it? What's missing? What can we do? Bringing AI to help them identify targets. And they've now got, I think, is it Ghana, not Ghana, sorry? Within the DRC, they've also got, is it Gambia? They've got a big copper deposit they're doing there now before, but they are moving into the DRC as well, yeah. So that's kind of an example, but there's a lot of real amazing tech and AI uses that the geological community is exploring, right? But the one major factor is really the sensors. Can we get deep? We've got technology that's coming from satellites, but it still needs sensors on the ground, and they're still only going 1 kilometre down or so, right? So, a good question.
We've got one question online from Ray Conning. Why do you think Australia's mining industry has been more successful than other countries in relation to mining legislation?
Well, first of all, because it was British, flag went in the ground, state owned the minerals. We came up, Eureka was all about making sure the Eureka Stockade Victoria, that the small miner got his correct mining rights. They fought for them, and that underpinned it. We had a period of time where anyone could go out and prospect, and any individual. It didn't cost a lot to do that. So we had a plethora of people doing that. We had a huge array of small miners all over. But I think with the education, the Brits that came out here with all their skill sets with mining, and then we found things. And just interestingly, all of our capital cities happened to be adjacent to coal. So we had Ipswich here, our coalfield. Melbourne had 2 coalfields either side of it. Sydney had Lithgow, and then they had the Illawarra to start with. Perth had Cobar down the not down the road. What is it? Collie down the road. South Australia had Lee Creek, which is a bit up, but that created their iron triangle and energy. So we started with that. And then we were kind of at a period of time too where gold exploration was exciting and gold rushes moved. And when we started finding gold in certain parts of Australia, it all came, and then all of a sudden it was like a ping pong ball zapping all over. So we've been in it a long time. I think it was the culture, the British culture, that brought it here. All right? And we've just been lucky enough, the oldest continent with an enormous array of minerals and mineral wealth.
In again to thank Bill.
I got a best question. All right. Hey, thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you, everyone. Next week, we have Jeff Deans from Modifying Factors. Jeff will be talking about complicated and complex, how modifying factors can impact resource development. So please join us next week for